The doctor had just received news that there was a victim trapped in a ravine. Without hesitation, he ran away and didn't forget to drag his tough brother and throw him on the plane. Because he knows that in a critical situation like this, the patient can play at any time, just 1 second late. When the plane entered a particularly dangerous area, the captain was a little confused. The doctor told the captain to stay aside. He would steer the plane over this area. The hard disciple, sitting next to him, did not have time to recover his soul. The doctor returned the steering wheel to the captain. After that, he pulled his hand and parachuted on the cliff to prepare to save the victim. As soon as he saw the victim, the doctor dispatched someone to quickly move him onto the plane. I will give first aid to the victim right on the steering wheel, otherwise I won't be able to catch up. Everyone with A-eyed eyes and A-mouths didn't believe that he could do it. But for the male protagonist, it was too normal because he had fought in more difficult circumstances. Back in time a few months ago, that car kept bowing until the sky gradually darkens and darkness covers everything like a blanket. The delegation was forced to stop in front of a suspiciously silent military base. On the outside, it was quiet, but the air was tense like a string pulled too much. Before he could breathe, the soldiers quickly surrounded the car. Everyone's eyes were as sharp as a new generation security scanner, scanning each face with great vigilance. In that unpleasant situation, the doctor did not hesitate and immediately pulled up his sleeve to reveal his characteristic tattoo. A familiar sign of identification, the soldier understood that this was not a passerby, but someone who needed to be reported immediately to the commander. Just when everything was still in a state of flux, the condition of the patient inside the car suddenly changed in a noticeable deterioration. The breathing rate was faster than each string, and the time at this time is like a rope that is suffocated, and every moment that passes is more precious than gold. However, due to the lack of an order, the base gate remained closed silently. There was no other way. The doctor was forced to make a reckless decision to bet all his faith on that moment. With a decisive flip of weight, the car accelerated straight forward, causing the whole space to be torn apart by the sound of the roaring engine. The air became chaotic in the eyes of the sound of the golden wind chariot coming close to his hand. It made everyone hold their breath, their hearts beating wildly, as if they had just sprinted. However, the driver still retains his incredible sanity. The steering wheel steadily glides through each dangerous moment in a narrow way, like a brain game. Even when the group fell into the strictest observation line, the soldiers suddenly received new instructions from their superiors. It turned out that what the commander was waiting for was not a rigid document or order, but the final evidence of unwavering mental decisiveness. The ability to put the safety of others before one's own. The person who dared to make a bold choice in that situation was the person he had been waiting for, while most people were trying to get away from the Syrian city, where the unrest lasts like a flower festival, but the kind that makes people just want to stay as far away as possible. There's a rather hairy man who puts on a backpack and drives straight into the center of the chaos. That person is none other than Kang Hyuk, a trauma specialist and a veteran member of the World Peace Society, a person you rarely meet in truly peaceful places. For him, after 6 years of nonstop work, Syria has become a second home. So, without any hesitation, Kang Hyuk rushed towards the center of the event with a fiery aura that didn't need a cape, but only a heavy backpack carrying supplies on his shoulders that looked like a real-life version of a superhero. Unfortunately, life doesn't always follow the script. Movies and events out there don't even bother to ask if he has a righteous cause or not. Then a sudden shock caused Kang Hyuk to be knocked out like a professional stuntman. The solid items in his backpack came out from the side like a paper firecracker at the festival, and he himself gradually sank into a state of fading because of overload. At the same time, inside a hospital in Syria, the situation remains equally tense. People who need support are constantly brought to the crowd, like queuing up to receive promotional gifts. At the most chaotic moment, the door of the hospital opened, and a Lao figure walked in, his whole body covered with dust. But the backpack is still firmly worn on the shoulder like a treasure. Although he has just experienced a collision that is not light, the will to heal and the sense of responsibility have helped Kang Hyuk stand firm and continue to rush into work like this. The effectiveness is so poor that people can't help but suspect that calling an emergency is sometimes like trying your luck. In just a short time, there have been more than a dozen cases that have not been handled in time. Not because the situation is too severe. This news made the Minister of Health shocked and immediately convened an emergency meeting at a speed like a house fire. After a frank analysis, she realized that conventional emergency rooms can only handle within certain limits. More complex cases require. The whole country quickly went all out to upgrade infrastructure and improve services. But then people soon realized that equipment alone is not enough. Because the lack of good experts is like opening a hot pot restaurant and forgetting the pot of broth. and so the name Kang-hyuk was mentioned as a rare hope. Without hesitation, the order was given to invite Britain to return to the country as soon as possible because the country at this time really needed Britain. A few days later, Kang-hyuk appeared at the airport with a dry and empty out. He just quietly pulled his suitcase, took a bite of bread as big as a brick to build a house, and went straight to the medical university hospital like he was walking after a break. While he had not yet had time to get used to the new pace of life, the emergency department entered an extremely difficult reception case, accompanied by a large metal object that was still stuck in front. The whole team had to strain their brains to handle each step carefully. For the young doctor in charge of the shift that day, all the knowledge of books suddenly became vague. Just a small mistake is enough to make things go in an unexpected direction. While the atmosphere was so tense that everyone felt that just singing a little softly would break down, Dr. Jung suddenly detected an unpleasant sign. On the patient's chest, the fluid accumulation around the heart is complicated, causing blood pressure to drop without braking like a car going down a pass and losing control. He also frantically called for aid in a mental state due to the strong movement. But wait for the cardiologist to be busy handling a difficult case, and it will take up to 2 hours to appear. Standing in the midst of the fragile realm of waiting and recklessness, Dr. Jung trembled so much that in a mood is like holding a letter of resignation to write because this is not his field of expertise at all. There wasn't a single line of instructions in my mind at the time that was clear enough to cling to. When the whole emergency room was holding their breath, hoping for some miracle, suddenly a person appeared and walked in very naturally. That way, just visit the wrong room and then casually handle the foreign object stuck in the patient's chest, causing the space to freeze in a few seconds. Dr. Jung almost lost connection to the ground because he was too shocked. As for the people around them, standing still in their heads, they had time to prepare themselves for the worst scenario. No one understands who this man is, much less how he can calmly do things that make other people's hearts want to fall out like that. The man didn't say a word, just quietly moved forward to locate the bruise and inserted the needle decisively. In just a few seconds, the accumulated fluid, blood pressure, the patient quickly stabilized the whole room as if he was removed from a breathing that lasted too long than allowed. At this time, the other man turned to look at Dr. Jung with eyes mixed with reproach and helpless. After a few seconds of thunderous silence before the heavy rain, he let go of a summative sentence, making Dr. Jung just want to shrink one size smaller. Dr. Jung stammered and explained that he was not in the emergency department, but worked in the before he could finish the sentence. The whole room erupted when he realized that the man who had just appeared was Kang-hyuk. The doctor was directly sent by the Ministry of Health to the person who was passed on as a legend who used to work in places with harsh conditions. So much so that just hearing his name is enough to... But the volume overwhelmed the whole machine that from now on he would handle everything here. He analyzed the situation coherently, pointing out that if you want to save people, you must understand the situation. Not just see that the foreign object is that by default everything inside has been lying. As soon as the patient was brought in, he heard the testimony of the witness, knowing that the object that caused... While another doctor rushed to find an anesthesiologist to close the shift quickly, he encountered a famous person with the ability to shirk responsibility for all kinds of reasons, even suggesting that the patient be transferred to another place to lighten the burden. Kang-shio heard this, and without many words, directly snatched the phone and solved it with a stiff conversation that made the vascular surgery officially began in a tense but controlled atmosphere. Because this is a relatively simple case, Kang-hai Australia directly instructed Dr. Jung step by step to point out the location of the affected vessel and request treatment. However, Dr. Jung's initial embarrassment, Kang-hyuk immediately let this person out and asked to call another doctor, surprising the entire anesthesiology department with his relentless working style. No one wanted to enter the room, so they finally pushed a Yugoslav resident doctor named Jae-kwang to help. While Kang-hyuk focused on processing his heart, Kang-hyuk showed interest in this judgment because, according to him, being a doctor without knowing how to reason is different from reading a manual in a foreign language. That judgment was completely correct. Kang-hyuk quickly processed breast closure, but Kang-hyuk casually commented that it was still 10 minutes later than his plan, because he had to be present at the inauguration ceremony at this time. Dr. Jung fell into a state of shock for the second time when he realized that Kang-hyuk did not work according at the hall of the deputy departments. There were a large number of attendees, and the minister also appeared to congratulate the Han department of the Department of Rectal Surgery. The same coordinator is entering the discussion that opens up. The coordinating director heard that Kang-hyuk was very profitable, but he only came from a university with little reputation. So in everyone's mind, two familiar possibilities immediately appeared. Either you have a super huge umbrella, or you really have abilities beyond normal. In any case, we will have to wait a little longer. By the time all the doctors were present in the hall, the main character was still silent. When the abbot called, the other end of the line was silent, as if he was meditating. On the contrary, the minister is still extremely relaxed because she can sit and wait for a long time. It wasn't until the air in the hall began to dilute because of the eyes of the wind that Kang Hyuk appeared calmly, as if he had arrived on time. Making people talk about being a doctor at this kind of time, patients must take care of themselves first. But he not only didn't care, but also frankly said that it was the hospital that needed to review his attitude. According to Kang Hyuk's observation, the current trauma care team only exists for a formality, mainly to legalize support from the government, but does not have a proper professional team at all. Therefore, the responsibility is also assigned to students to do. This is like making it difficult for young people who have just entered the profession. Kang Hyuk thinks that it is a kind of person with a heart, so he proposed to disband the current injury team. The whole hall immediately fell into a state of confusion because it felt like someone had just thrown a bucket. Many people are angry that Kang Hyuk has just arrived too extravagantly. But he still didn't say it all, instead of criticizing Shin On's proposal to establish a true trauma care center. A gathering of doctors who really want to save lives and are willing to take responsibility to the end. Hearing this, the minister immediately responded enthusiastically and announced, Kang Hyuk thanked the minister and ended his speech neatly. The abbot wanted to keep him for more. But Kang Hyuk didn't mind at all, but leaving like that was completed after a very ordinary day of the day. He then went to the trauma department recovery room to check on the patient who had just been treated earlier. However, because it has not been officially launched, Nurse John thinks that Kang Hyuk is a suspicious stranger. Kang Hyuk tried to remember the name of the doctor who had handled this case with him, but the expression was too confusing. So Nurse John immediately doubted his identity and hung up the phone without hesitation. At that time, Dr. Jung rushed to report that a climber had unfortunately encountered an incident in which his current condition was very critical, while the ambulance could not reach him, so he sent a rescue helicopter. Kang Hyuk assessed that the patient did not have much time, so he asked for a helicopter to take him directly to the hospital first. Then he asked Dr. John to prepare the necessary tools because the two of them would go on the road together. Dr. Jung stopped the pressure because he didn't understand why he was included in the plan, but he still followed it because he thought that Kang Hyuk was just talking for fun. Kang Hyuk borrowed the car to enter the recovery room and told him to call him when he was ready. Meanwhile, he walked along the corridors looking for the patient's room and was accidentally spotted by Nurse John. She immediately asked him to leave the internal area, which led to a rather awkward scene. When she saw the tattoo on Kang Hyuk's hand and remembered the stories she had heard about patients with complicated circumstances, Nurse John began to deduce in the direction that she had created an epic action movie with all kinds of thrilling episodes. So much so that she herself felt a little tired of her imagination. Not wanting to let things go too far, she decided to stop Kang Hyuk in any way. Fortunately, at that time, Dr. Jung appeared in time and confirmed that Kang Hyuk was the newly appointed trauma doctor. Nurse John had just realized that he had just misunderstood the level, so he began to worry about the future of his work in his heart. Kang Hyuk not only didn't let go of her stomach, but also conveniently gave her a nickname that sounded very lifelike. Dr. Jung was praised for the first time, so he was happy, as if he were a big reward. At this time, he received a call saying that a rescue helicopter had arrived at the hospital. Kang Hyuk immediately ran to the rooftop, but found the helicopter landing on the football field. After that, he went to visit the patient who had just woken up. This person could not hide his appreciation because he did not think that he would be cared for by such a dedicated doctor. Kang Hyuk said that being a doctor does not distinguish whose situation it is. Also introduced Dr. Jung as an important contributor to the previous treatment. Before Dr. Jung could even understand the matter, he was dragged by Kang Hyuk because he had said from the beginning that the two would go together. It turned out that Dr. Jung was very afraid of heights, so during the flight, the spirit of going up and down was no different from a glider. The captain of the rescue team exclaimed that this was the first time that a doctor had accompanied the mission. Kang Hyuk replied that from now on this will happen more often because he is not the type of doctor who only sits in an air-conditioned room. After that, he prepared to approach the area below with Dr. Jung. Although Dr. Jung was extremely worried, thanks to the reminder that if the victim was his relative, what would happen, he finally calmed down to continue his mission. Kang Hyuk said goodbye to the captain and immediately reviewed Dr. Jung and jumped down together and landed neatly and safely like in an A-grade action movie. Dr. Jung looked back, looked down, and then looked at Kang Hyuk. In the end, it was only known that Mon Man left because there was no more reasonable option besides that. As soon as she approached the patient, Kang Hyuk took a stethoscope to check her condition. She accidentally revealed the tattoo on her hand. This made Dr. Jung a little suspicious because according to the regulations, doctors are not allowed to tattoo. But in this situation, he had to temporarily put aside all questions to focus on his expertise. Kang Hyuk quickly speculated that the patient had a possibility of cerebral hemorrhage and needed internal decompression intervention. The problem was that this place was no different from a war studio. So he immediately asked the rescue team to ask the patient to get on the helicopter. The patient could not wait to go to the hospital. So Kang Hyuk decided to intervene right on the way back, and the worry mixed with everyone's admiration. The patient's upper right lung does not hear breathing, indicating that the pneumothorax carries the pressure and needs to be treated immediately. Kang Hyuk immediately released the trapped air to help the patient breathe again. Although this person is still not conscious when examining the pupils, there are no physiological reflexes. Dr. Jung was tasked with shaving the patient's head in preparation for the next steps. While Captain stood next to him, he couldn't hide his confusion, wondering if the surgery in this condition was okay. Kang Hyuk only calmly reminded that when he was working in Afghanistan, the conditions were much harsher. Returning to reality, the preparation was completed. Kang Hyuk opened the trachea to support the patient's breathing and then marked the location that needed intervention. A small confusion appeared when Dr. Jung suddenly realized that he was not carrying a portable compartment machine. But thankfully, the rescue kit still had enough hammers and sticks to keep going. Kang Hyuk disinfected the tools and then started working in everyone's round eyes full of surprise. A little later, the helicopter landed at the hospital and the patient was taken straight into the operating room. But a situation arose when the nurse reported that the anesthesiologist could not be contacted because this person was about to leave work and was determined not to pick up the phone. Kang Hyuk at that time just wanted to run to find out right and left, but Nurse John promptly advised him to stay calm and finish this shift first, and then continue the relationship. At the same time, he contacted another anesthesiologist, Kang Hyuk, and suddenly remembered Jeong Yin, a student who he found quite suitable for him. Nurse John explained that Jeong Yin was a fourth-year student who had his work suspended to study for the graduation exam. But Kang Hyuk didn't mind much because saving people was still the #1 priority for him, and he believed that Jeong Yin would think the same. Sure enough, when he received the call, Jeong Yin agreed to come immediately without hesitation. Returning to the hospital room, Kang Hyuk checked again and found that the patient could not catch the pulse. When Dr. Jung prepared the ultrasound machine, Kang Hyuk quickly treated it directly with a needle and removed the plasma that caused the blockage. Looking at the color of the plasma, he was even more sure that his judgment was correct. Kang Hyuk took advantage of the opportunity to convey to Dr. Jung that every minute and second with a patient is extremely precious. Once you have grasped the situation, you need to be bold to make a decision instead of rigidly sticking to the process of carrying a notebook. The intracranial decompression operation officially began, and Dr. Jung could not hide his anticipation. See what more miracles Kang Hyuk will continue to create this time. To be fair, Kang Hyuk's skills are already at an unquestionable level. Masterfully drill a small hole, and then release the pressure outwards. The seemingly extremely difficult surgery was completed by Kang Hyuk within 1 hour and 30 minutes. Then came lung surgery because there was a part of the lung damaged due to a fall on a cliff. First, cut the artery, then the lower right to reduce plasma flow, then cut the bronchi to prevent air from entering the damaged area. Finally, the vein is removed and the part of the lung that causes pain to the patient is removed. Dr. Jung was also dumbfounded when he saw 2 consecutive surgeries in just 2 hours. After going outside, Dr. Jung looked at Kang Hyuk without accepting his eyes. "I'm tired, so let's move to my department to work." Kang Hyuk gave Dr. Jung a proposal to transfer to the trauma department. Just like that, he would pass on all his combat experience to him. However, Dr. Jung, who was in the rectal surgery department, also had an instructor. Kang Hyuk showed disdain when she saw that Dr. Jung chose an elegant department to sit and eat a golden bowl. He immediately denied that I wanted to save people just like him. So, I moved to the trauma department to accompany me. Dr. Jung was threatened with losing his secret. He chased after him, begging Kang Shi to give himself more time to think. Looking at Dr. Jung's attitude, Kang Shio thought that he was in the eyes of the instructor. "Who is your instructor? Is he the dean of the Han department?" Hearing this, Kang Shi immediately went to find the dean of the department to ask for someone. On the other hand, the head of the department came to find the coordinator. He was extremely bitter when on the first day of taking office, Kang Hyuk sent a rescue helicopter, knowing that it was very expensive. The director of coordination immediately told Dean Han one more piece of bad news. Kang Hyuk seems to be close to Dr. Jung, and the head of the department is about to lose his favorite student. Dr. Jung is the valedictorian of Korea Medical University who has won scholarships for many years in a row. The head of the department also intends to let Dr. Jung try to succeed the position of head of the department of rectal surgery. He had a feeling that he was about to be held by Kang Hyuk, but the dean of the department couldn't let that happen. He was going to ask the coordinating director for help, but when did the coordinating director disappear? It turned out that the director of coordination went to the director to confide in the director. He told the director that Kang Hyuk was introduced to the minister by the director of a famous hospital. Kang Hyuk's skill is a wild beast that can steal people from the hands of the Pluto King. Now that the director has just realized that Kang Hyuk can save more people, the more patients will come. At that time, the hospital deficit was even more severe because now no one is not using hospital health insurance. The chief once made a private appointment with Kang Hyuk to try to offer a low salary, advising him to think carefully before accepting the position. But Kang Hyuk said a blue sentence that my family is not short of money and he works because he wants to save people. At present, the abbot has no way to chase Kang Hyuk, so he has to be discouraged. The coordinating director came up with a plan to find a certain crime for Kang Hyuk and then expelled him for the evaluation period in the next 2 months. The abbot saw that for too long. He wanted Kang Shi to leave as soon as possible. At this time, Dean Han returned to the office. He was startled to see Kang Shi-yao sitting here. Kang Shi-yu invited the head of Kwa Han to sit down so that he could ask the question. Dean Han was confused. Obviously, he was the head of the room. Then he just stood up, but when he heard that, Dean Ko-han immediately sat down angrily. As soon as he sat down, Kang Shi-yu made a proposal for him to teach Dr. Jung. Of course, the head of the Han department did not agree because Dr. Jung was his favorite student. Kang Shi-yu saw that the head of the Han department was so selfish. What if Dr. Jung didn't like the rectal surgery department? Dean Han was confident that there was no such thing, so let him decide. Dean Han agreed to close the deal that the 3 people will meet at 4 p.m. Achieving his goal, Kang Shi got up and left, and the head of the Han department saw that something was wrong. On the other side, Dr. Jung was still hesitating whether to accept Kang Shi-yu's offer or not, so he consulted his friend. If it was yesterday, Dr. Jung would definitely not accept it. But after seeing Kang Shi's skills, he really wanted to become a good doctor like him. The friend rejected that thought because Kang Hyuk is a doctor who is both crazy and responsible. Can Dr. Jung do it or not? Perhaps not, so Dr. Jung made his decision. He texted Kang Hyuk to apologize for defying his expectations. However, Kang Hyuk still hasn't given up. He goes to Nurse John and asks her how to win a person. Women will definitely have more experience than men. Nurse John heard Dr. Jung's name in his heart and felt extremely excited. She also wanted Dr. Jung to return to the trauma department because he was the most handsome and obedient doctor in the hospital. Moreover, Nurse John has worked in the trauma department for 5 years, and she does not want the trauma department to be discontinued. That's why Nurse John began to plot for Kang Hyuk. Dr. Jung is a soft-hearted person, so Kang Hyuk has to play psychological blows. Do you have anything special for Dr. Jung to sympathize with? Kang Shio thought about it over and over again. It was nothing. He was not a stumbling block. Nurse John could only remind Kang Hyuk that perhaps the head of the welding department was also playing psychological blows with Dr. Jung. Kang Shi-yu immediately just swore and ran to the office of the head of the welding department. Indeed, Dr. Jung was here. Kang Hyuk angrily threatened the 2 of them with all their souls when it was clear that it was a 4 o'clock appointment. But now it is only 3 hours and 20 minutes. By the way, the head of the welding department also wanted to settle this matter. Kang Shio pulled out a chair and sat down and asked Dr. Jung's decision. Seeing that he had many difficult things to say, the head of the welding department immediately told him who had taught him to this day. Kang Hyuk immediately exposed the head of the welding department who wanted to train a good doctor in exchange for the label of expert. If the head of the welding department is not allowed to go first, it will be a long time before Dr. Jung can be a treating doctor. On the contrary, if he follows Kang Hyuk in just the next 5 years, Dr. Jung will achieve 1/4 of his qualifications. The head of the welding department expressed his lips and disparaged Kang Shi-yu's, always talking about his qualifications. Do you have as many degrees as me? The head of the welding department began to list a series of degrees that made Kang Hyuk count to the point of headache. Dr. Jung will choose the degree of the head of the department of welding or the qualification of Kang Hyuk. Seeing that he hadn't finished thinking about Kang Shi, he immediately wanted to know the reason why Dr. Jung was indeed not confident in surgery. Hearing this, Kang Shi-yu's didn't want to embarrass him either, because a doctor who considers the disadvantage does not dare to make decisions on his own. Just hesitating for 1 second and 1 minute is enough to push the patient to the door of death. Kang Shi turned around and left, and Dr. Jung immediately shrunk after him. He was going to ask Kang Shi what he could do if he became a trauma surgeon. Kang Shi didn't want to promise, because no one could say anything in advance. But what Dr. Jung went through today will continue to repeat itself in the future, and he will save more people. Now Dr. Jung noticed the photos in Kang Shi's office. These are all patients Kang Hyuk has saved, including children and the elderly, each with their own story. Kang Hyuk told their story to Dr. Jung, which made him cry. Accidentally or intentionally, Kang Hyuk played the right psychological blow of the nurse around the game. In the end, Dr. Jung agreed to become a trauma surgeon. At this time, the head of the Han department rushed in and handed it to Dr. Jung to return the sorghum. This was passed down by the instructor of the Han department, and now he wants Dr. Jung to accept it. I hope you will understand my heart. But once it is finalized, Dr. Jung will not change his mind. The head of the Han Al department took all the cups back in the office and vented his anger. He couldn't let the traitor write an email notifying him. From now on, Dr. Jung will take over all the shifts of the trauma department. Dr. Jung heard the news from his friend in a panic. This is different from wanting him to work and go to worship the Pluto King. On the other side, Kang Hyuk also read the email, so he immediately called Dr. Jung to ask about it in a way that was both beating and spraying. 2400 hours, 01, 365 days, 1 year. You must know that when you agree to my proposal. Dr. Jung sat down in frustration, and Kang Shi-yao smiled and appeared in front of him. Kang Shi-yao will not let Dr. Jung work to the point of garlic. But such an email notification has a good thing, because everyone will know that there is a doctor who is dedicated to patients. Dr. Jung immediately regained his spirits, but he still had a question as to why Kang Shi-yao chose him. Kang Hyuk immediately answered that on the first day he came to the hospital, he saw Dr. Jung running and flowing very fast. That sense of urgency is what a doctor should have. Dr. Jung assured Kang Shi that UC would not live up to his expectations. Kang Hyuk reminded Dr. Jung to reply to the email of the head of the welding department. Dr. Jung helped Kang Shi to convey that the cup of Chow Li tea was not a fake, which made the head of the Han department swallow this lump of stars. At this time, Kang Hyuk changed the name of the trauma department to the Trauma Care Center. At the same time, welcome a new member, Nurse John Tang CUC and colleague Dr. Jung will come to the trauma department. Colleagues disobeyed how long Dr. Jung's secretions would last. Nurse John believes that with that enthusiasm, Dr. Jung will never give up. However, after just 1 day of work, Dr. Jung was tired and disintegrated. When he got to his room, he didn't bother to change his clothes, but climbed into bed to sleep. On the contrary, Kang Shi-yao was still lacking energy. The two had just blinked their eyes. Suddenly, Dr. Jung received a call from Nurse John that there was an emergency. Dr. Jung immediately woke up Kang Shi-yao. Unexpectedly, Kang Shi-yao had finished changing her clothes, and the two of them ran to Nurse John to inquire about the situation. A car then crashed into a car in the tunnel, causing a series of car crashes. The two occupants of the car who were most seriously injured are currently being transported to hospitals. Kang Hyuk and Dr. Jung assisted in taking the patient to the emergency room. The male patient's abdomen showed signs of enlarged bones, speculated to be abdominal hemorrhage. Kang Hyuk immediately gave first aid and asked Dr. Jung to prepare the operating room. After that, Kang Shi-yao immediately ran to check on the patient's situation. On the other hand, he found that the female patient had large bones in her legs, so he had to transfer her to the imaging department. On the other side, Dr. Jung had finished preparing the operating room. Only the anesthesiologist was working on the sidelines. When Dr. Jung urged the anesthesiologist, he also showed an unpleasant attitude. Nurse John saw this and asked him angrily, didn't he see that the patient's situation was very critical? Wait until the patient is gone forever. Can you be responsible? The anesthesiologist still despises what is this thing saying? Dare to call Nurse John this and that. So brave, the anesthesiologist even wants to know her name to denounce her to the dean. Dr. Jung advised both sides to be calm after all. They were the same people in the hospital. At this moment, Kang Shi-yao walked in, and he asked the anesthesiologist's name to see who accused him. The anesthesiologist immediately lowered his voice and went back to his work. Kang Hyuk also reminded Nurse John that this is not the time to fight with that kind of person. The patient is important. Hearing him say that, Nurse John promised that she would learn from her experience next time. Kang Hyuk didn't blame Nurse John. Such wars in the future, let him bear it himself. On the other side, the abbot made an appointment to meet Jung Jong-hwan privately and asked him what he thought about Kang Shi-yao. Jong-hwan praised Kang Shi-yao with all his words, making the director feel uncomfortable. He still had to smile because there was something he wanted to ask Jong-hwan for, which was to be an insider next to Kang Shi-yao. Just report what Kang Shi-yao does every day. The abbot promises to support Jong-hwan after he graduates. Unexpectedly, Jong-hwan immediately agreed to this seemingly absurd proposal. Returning to the operating room, Kang Hyuk is undergoing abdominal surgery, but the situation is not satisfactory. The male patient continues to bleed plasma. Dr. Jung suggested that the source of plasma bleeding must be found first. Kang Shi-yao suddenly stopped and stood slowly for a long time, making Dr. Jung extremely intestinal. It turned out that Kang Shi-yao was thinking about what was the cause of the plasma bleeding. Finally, the broken circuit was found, and the doctors sewed it up together. Dr. Jung still didn't understand how Kang Shi-yao could find the circuit with the naked eye, but now he didn't have time to explain. Although the male patient had stopped bleeding plasma, the liver was damaged by up to 80% and could not be removed. Moreover, male patients with type E cirrhosis who have successful surgery have an extremely low survival rate. Dr. Jung didn't want to give up. Everyone had a headache to think of a solution. However, at this time, Kang Hyuk asked for abdominal stitches for the male patient. Risks in surgery are inevitable, and they are not gods who can save everyone. Suddenly, Nurse John came up with a solution, and the anesthesiologist jumped in her mouth and asked her if she thought she was a doctor or something. Dr. Jung couldn't hold back anymore and gently explained to the anesthesiologist. Compared to his age, he is not as good as Nurse John, but compared to his experience with trauma cases, the anesthesiologist is even more unqualified. Nurse John has been working in this trauma department since the early days, so please learn to be respectful. In the face of those criticisms, the anesthesiologist apologized at the end. She turned to ask Nurse John what she meant by saying, She wanted to know if a male patient received an organ donation. Of course, the survival rate was higher, but where to find an organ donor now? Nurse John Lean explained that she bumped into the organ donation coordinator just now. There was an old man who lost consciousness of his brain and then logged out and registered to donate all his organs. Kang-hyuk asked Nurse John to call the dispatcher. However, the coordinator said that it is currently impossible to collect organs on their own because they have not been able to contact the elderly's family. It is necessary to have their permission from the hospital to perform the surgery. Kang-hyuk didn't have much time left. He wanted to ask for the address of the old man's family. He would go to persuade himself. However, when hearing the name of the family, Nurse John Lean realized that it was a male patient lying in the operating room. Everyone finally understood why the dispatcher couldn't contact the family member. It turned out that the two brothers who were squeezed by the ears were the children of the old man. They were going to the hospital to see their father for the last time, and then made an application to donate their organs to the hospital. In this way, it is easier to check the plasma group before performing surgery. Kang-hyuk asked to immediately prepare for the surgery, but the dispatcher did not agree because they had to work according to the procedure. First, the signature of the family member is needed, then it must be on the priority list for transplantation. Kang-hyuk was extremely angry. Shouldn't it be possible for their father and son to reunite together? Ignore that crazy process. If anything goes wrong, Kang-hyuk will take full responsibility. He kept talking, and finally the coordinator agreed. Kang-hyuk also had something to ask for, which was to keep a kidney for him. After that, Kang-hyuk asked everyone to prepare for the surgery. He was sure that the male patient would live, and he would also help the old man pass away peacefully. Later, the old man was transferred to the room to pick up Kang-hyuk and Dr. Jung was waiting here. They did a minute of experimentation for the old man. But only 1 second later, Kang-hyuk has embarked on surgery. Now that time is the most important. Kang-hyuk only takes the right liver and then assigns the rest of the work to another doctor. He and Dr. Jung brought the liver to the operating room of the male patient, and the liver transplant immediately began. Kang-hyuk was so used to this type of surgery that it was completed quickly. The male patient was saved, but Kang-hyuk still had work to do, which was the surgery of the female patient. At this moment, Dr. Jung suddenly chased and blocked Kang-hyuk's road. Because the female patient had been transferred to the presentation department, the trauma department did not have the right to enter. Moreover, the doctor who is operating on a female patient is also an extremely similar person to Kang-hyuk. It wasn't until Kang-hyuk promised Dr. Jung that he wouldn't cause trouble that he refused to get out of the way. In the room, the doctor was still having some difficulties. Kang-hyuk didn't want to bother to just go through the female patient file a little. The doctor who presented the presentation heard about Kang-hyuk as the person who made the head of the Korean department lose appetite and sleep. But Kang-hyuk doesn't care what people say about her. He found that the female patient's Christine index was quite high, so he turned to the nurse to ask if her kidneys were not working. The nurse confirmed that the female patient's kidneys were stagnant, and the test results showed high hematoma. Kang-hyuk wondered why the female patient was not transferred to the nephrology department. After knowing that the nurse had called a nephrologist to assist, Kang-hyuk immediately contacted him. He wanted to know the direction of treatment that the nephrologist would use for female patients. His plan was to undergo dialysis and follow up on test results. Kang-hyuk affirmed that the female patient would die, but the nephrologist also ran out of options. At this time, Kang-hyuk made a proposal for a kidney transplant for a female patient. The kidney has been prepared. Kang-hyuk has guessed the condition of the female patient. It is true that she has a vision. After that, Kang-hyuk brought the kidney to the operating room and assigned the task of dialysis to the nephrologist. He will do kidney transplant surgery, which must save the female patient. The female patient's condition was very critical and had to complete the surgery in 30 minutes. The doctor looked contemptuous and said that the kidney transplant surgery for 30 minutes thought he was a god. However, Kang-hyuk didn't say a word, but just focused on doing it. Looking at the way he performed the kidney transplant, the doctor also had to roll his eyes in admiration. It took less than 30 minutes for the kidney transplant to be completed in 24 minutes, so the doctor could not say anything else. After that, Kang-shi and Dr. Jung left without saying anything. Dr. Jung thought that he would be able to sleep, but Kang-shio wanted to go to a place that was the donor's room. Just now, because of the rush of time, he could not be kind. So now Kang-shi wants to use a minute of prayer to express his gratitude to the old man. Because not everyone has a noble sacrifice and agrees to donate. Dr. Jung was extremely touched. Kang-hyuk is really a doctor who has both heart and vision. Dr. Jung was finally able to go to bed, but after taking a nap, Dr. Jung was woken up by Kang-hyuk. The two of them also had to go to the ICU to check on the patient's condition. Today, there are 2 patients discharged from the hospital. They're full of thanks to Kang-hyuk. Kang-hyuk has only one wish, which is to take pictures with her patients. He doesn't care about his degree or qualifications, only how many people he has saved. He is a true doctor. After that, Kang-hyuk went to the room of the male liver transplant patient. Nurse John and Dr. Jung were also looking for Kang-hyuk. Since Kang-hyuk came to the trauma department to work, The accounting department has sent more than 10 emails warning about the budget deficit. Kang Hyuk wondered if the Ministry of Health Insurance Assessment and Assessment should have paid that amount. In principle, people's health insurance money will be divided among hospitals with many patients. Nurse John continued to explain that what Kang Hyuk said was not wrong, but when the money arrived at the hospital, it had to be divided among the departments. However, not all departments that can save many people will get a lot of budget. The director divides the budget according to the profits each department earns. So, it is majestic. This is true that Kang Hyuk has not experienced life. So, it is impossible to know. Nurse John is worried that the trauma department will be dissolved at this momentum, but Kang Hyuk will not let that happen. Suddenly, the head of Kwon angrily came to find Kang Shio to ask about it. Dr. Jung immediately avoided his face, but was still discovered by the head of the Han department. It turned out that there was a meeting of Kang Hyuk's faculties today, and the whole group sat and waited, which made the director extremely angry. Actually, Kang Hyuk knew that there was a meeting, but he didn't see the need to go to the head of the Han department. He just wanted to eat and swallow Kang Hyuk alive. But the coordinating director advised the head of Kwon to calm down. He can ignore the fact that Kang Hyuk did not come to the meeting, but he cannot ignore the budget deficit of the trauma department. Actually, Kang Hyuk knew that there was a meeting, but he didn't see the need to go to the head of the Han department. He just wanted to eat and swallow Kang Hyuk alive. But the coordinating director advised the head of Kwon to calm down. He can ignore the fact that Kang Hyuk did not come to the meeting, but he cannot ignore the budget deficit of the trauma department. It's 300 million that money, but it's not a banyan leaf that is so indiscriminately discharged. Kang Hyuk still said that the minister invested 10 billion. The coordinating director and head of the department Han laughed and said that the money was not invested in each trauma department, but for the whole hospital. They used that money to buy equipment and remodel facilities. Kang Hyuk couldn't bear to see that all the money was invested in departments without patients. Moreover, that was not the original purpose of the minister. Now that the trauma department has saved many people, they're naturally accused of a crime of doing so, but it is considered good or something, where you guys have taken all the money. Dean Han advised Kang Hyuk to break the brakes. Kang Hyuk didn't bother to talk anymore. From now on, don't mention the deficit of the trauma department. I'm going to save people next. Dean Han was extremely excited, promising not to live up to the expectations of the coordinating director. Going outside, the head of the department, Han immediately called a friend who worked at the World Peace Society to find out about Kang Hyuk when he was a doctor in Syria. At this time, Kang Hyuk came to check on the female patient for a kidney transplant. Dean Han forbade Kang Hyuk to walk out the door, but he liked it very much. After Kang Hyuk left, the new coordinating director asked the head of Kwon to find a way to get rid of this guy. In this way, he will be able to get in front of the director, and the head of the Han department will inherit the position of coordinating director. Her readings were good, but Dr. Jung's readings were erratic, and it seemed like he was worried about something. Dr. Jung spoke his thoughts in his heart whether the trauma department would be stable with such a budget deficit. After listening to Kang Hyuk, she still encouraged her. It's okay. Everything will be fine. To relieve Dr. Jung's spirit, today he will take Dr. Jung out to eat. Call Nurse John. Remember to tell her to dress a little like a human. Soon Nurse John received a call from Dr. Jung. Knowing that Kang Hyuk criticized her for not having a taste in dressing, Nurse John wanted to dress up. But I couldn't find any beautiful sets, so I just didn't take off the cage. On the movie, a handsome doctor is being shown, but Nurse John only sees a handsome doctor in the movie, but he doesn't do anything in real life. Then she hasn't seen Kang Hyuk on her head because he has made so many hearts. Plus, Dr. John's beauty is also 190 with Kang Hyuk. Kang Hyuk asked if this set was given to her by her girlfriend, and Dr. Jung immediately denied it. So it's my favorite son, so I'm sure you're buying clothes, right? The two quickly got into the car to the candy restaurant, and there was an emergency patient. Dr. Jung thought that Kang Hyuk took him to eat normally, but he didn't expect it to be an expensive Chinese restaurant. Nurse John was afraid to blush, so she should be dressed better than this. Dr. Jung saw that there were a lot of dishes, and the dishes here were all expensive, but Kang Hyuk said lightly that he assured me of a lot of money. Nurse John said that Kang Hyuk was a rich man, but he asserted that he was rich. Kang Hyuk's mother died early. His father was just an environmental sanitation worker. Because Kang Hyuk has experienced the scene of taking her father to all hospitals, which every hospital refuses. That's why he wants to become a doctor who saves lives, so that no one falls into the same situation as himself. Seeing that Dr. Jung almost burst into tears, she told everyone to eat quickly. Dr. Jung still had a question about what the tattoo on Kang Hyuk's hand meant. He said that it helps to avoid all copper candies. When Kang Hyuk worked as a doctor in Syria, he was not only a doctor, but he also had to hold a gun to fight. Kang Hyuk has something to declare that from now on, he will not call Dr. Jung Anus anymore, but will call him number one. Dr. Jung thought he was the number one disciple, but it turned out to be the number one slave. Slave number one took a towel and told me that Dr. Jung was extremely helpless. Suddenly, Dr. Jung received a call reporting that a pedestrian had a serious accident. Dr. Jung and Kang Hyuk had to go right away, and Nurse John could stay and continue eating. Dr. John was going to take a taxi, but Kang Hyuk had a faster way to move. The two took a motorbike to the hospital, but refused to wear a helmet. On the way, two people passed the scene of the accident. Kang Hyuk was even more urgent. However, when he arrived at the hospital, the golden time to save the patient had passed. Kang Hyuk advised the emergency doctor to stop because the patient had already died. At this time, Kang Hyuk deeply regretted not being in the hospital when the patient needed it. That's how you can see that if you neglect for 1 second, someone will die immediately. The trauma flower is only for those who can withstand great pressure. Sympathy for the patient's eternal passing is also a luxury for them. People have to keep running to save many people. Moreover, Dr. Jung, who ran for 1 year, also experienced many things in the trauma department, so he gradually adapted to the pressure. He had only been able to take a shower once in a few days, but while Dr. Jung was taking a shower, Kang Hyuk saw someone calling him. Ji-young is the name of the girl. Maybe this kid is dating. Then Dr. Jung hurriedly stole the phones, and the two continued to work. But on the street, Kang Hyuk wondered if there was a name or message him recently. Just looking at one, Dr. Jung realized that it was the name of the director. It turned out that the director wanted Kang Hyuk to go to the meeting, so he dared to throw the letter into one spam. Dr. Jung advised Kang Shi to go to the meeting, but he didn't like the meeting. However, it couldn't be left forever, so he decided to come and break the ice. Kang Shi didn't forget to remind Dr. Jung that Ji-young called him just now. After that, Kang Hyuk came to the meeting room. He was going to rush straight in, but the security guard blocked the door because he had to wait for his name to be called. Kang Shio felt bored to do, but did a lot of procedures, and then he remembered Dr. Jung's instructions. What is possible should be restrained, because this is a meeting to ask for a budget. Departments that do not have a voice, such as the trauma department, are lucky not to have their budgets reduced. Kang Hyuk entered the last meeting room when she saw a bunch of mincers waiting for figs with their mouths open. Soon after the coordinating director began the meeting last year, the hospital's revenue was 30 billion, a significant increase over the same period last year. The top one profit comes from the monastery house, but the vagabonds still applaud and celebrate excitedly because many people are gone forever. The second and third are parking lots and restaurants. Until the fourth, there is only one treatment department, which is the neurology department. The director wanted everyone to cheer for the neurology department. Kang Shi could only shake his head in disgust. The budget is allocated by 5 punches. He needs the whole edge. Next is the budget deficit column. Everyone who is named is embarrassed. The director still encouraged them to try to make such a deficit. However, there is one alarming department, Kang Hyuk's trauma department, with a deficit of more than 400 million. At this time, Kang Hyuk was still calm because he thought the coordinating director had miscalculated. Plus the 10 billion ministers who support the trauma department is also profitable. The coordinating director immediately justified that it was the minister who invested in the trauma department. But the anesthesiology department and the emergency room are all involved in the surgery of the trauma department and have to share the money with them. Kang Hyuk immediately argued that the deficit must also be shared by the departments. Why only blame each trauma department? It's like delicious honey, and we all slurp the garbage and pour it on our heads. The director advised Kang Hyuk to restrain herself, but how could she restrain herself? Since Kang Shi arrived at the hospital, the patient survival rate has increased significantly. Obviously, the hospital was built to save people, but the effort to save people is not recognized. The doctor always only talks about money. Now the director is forced to praise Kang Shi, but the deficit is still a deficit. Kang Shio was extremely bitter and said that he could not have told me to save a few people. The director hopes that Kang Hyuk can both save many people and reduce the budget deficit. Kang Shi laughed and said that the director really knows how to joke. He is good at it, so go and do it. After that, the head of the welding department used the excuse of Kang Hyuk to suspend the director. Then he angrily announced that he would expose Kang Shi's secret. At this time, Nurse John and Dr. Jung were discussing whether Kang Shi would make it through the meeting. Kang Shi is already his father, so they don't need to worry about him. Suddenly, Dr. Jung received a phone call informing him of a car accident. Seeing the situation, Nurse John wondered if he should call Kang Shi. Dr. Jung will go to see the patient's situation first, but he didn't expect that the patient is Ji-young. She is the daughter of the head of the welding department and a junior that Dr. Jung loves very much. Dr. Jung couldn't keep his composure. Nurse John immediately reminded him, because if he is distracted, the patient will be gone forever. Dr. Jung asked Nurse John to call Kang Hyuk and then came in to provide first aid to Ji-young. On the other side, Kang Hyuk was in a meeting when she received a call from Nurse John. Ignoring that the head of the welding department was still scolding, he didn't bother to greet anyone, so he just went straight out. The head of the welding department tried to keep Kang Hyuk, but he also received a notice that his daughter had just been in a traffic accident. The head of the welding department immediately collapsed and ran out with Kang Hyuk. He begged Kang Shi to put aside his previous hatred to save his daughter. Kang Hyuk asked the head of the welding department to avoid the way he was going to the emergency room. If the head of the welding department continued to obstruct his daughter, he would not be able to save him. Then Kang-shi went to the emergency room, and he asked Nurse John to block the head of the welding department from letting him into the operating room. Nurse John went out to advise the head of the welding department to calm down if he still wanted to save his daughter. Knowing that he could not enter the emergency room, the head of the welding department immediately asked about the situation inside. Knowing that Jung was seriously injured, he knelt on the ground and cried. In the end, Nurse John wanted the head of the welding department to trust Kang-shi. But unfortunately, there is something uncertain. The head of the engineering department wants to be with his daughter at the last moment. Nurse John nodded in agreement with him, and then she hugged the head of the welding department and comforted him. Inside, Dr. Jung was performing CPR while Kang-hai was using a cardiac detoxifier. He is still doing everything to bring Jung's heart rate back to normal. There was a time when the heart rate was 0, but fortunately Jung restored his heart rate. Nurse Jung went out to inform the head of the welding department, so he was also somewhat relieved. Then the nurse conveyed Kang-hyuk's word that they would have an echocardiogram to know the condition. The head of the welding department said that the trauma doctor could not read the echocardiogram, so he wanted to call the cardiologist. Nurse John asked the nurse to do as Kang-shi said, and she immediately ran to prepare the operating room. Inside, Kang-hyuk was having an echocardiogram when she saw a mark on the left ventricle wall. Kang-shio found that Dr. Jung was in an unstable mood and asked if he could do surgery. Dr. Jung regained his composure, affirming that he had to do it because Jung was extremely important to him. Soon, they transferred Jung to the operating room, and at this time, Kang-shi informed the head of the welding department about her daughter's situation. He said that Jung had a ruptured heart and needed urgent surgery, but he thought that Kang-shi misread the ultrasound results. There's no time left. Kang-hyuk will take full responsibility. Dean Han still chased Kang-hyuk into the operating room. The family member did not agree that the doctor should not perform the surgery. The dean of the welding department stubbornly thinks that Kang-hyuk will harm her daughter because of personal self-interest. Kang-hyuk called Dr. Jung out because in case the patient's family members are not conscious, as long as 2 doctors agree, surgery can be done. Kang-hyuk agreed, so the rest of the decision rested with Dr. Jung. The head of the welding department wanted him to refuse, but just like that, Jung would be gone forever. Dr. Jung decided to trust Kang-hyuk. He pushed the head of the welding department out and asked the nurse to hold the door. Faced with that situation, the head of the welding department was even more panicked. Now the cardiologist has just arrived, but the surgery is being carried out inside. The head of the welding department and the cardiologist who wanted to go inside just stood and watched, not disturbed. Nurse John understood the situation of the head of the welding department and opened the door for 2 people. It's true that the heart is broken, the plasma shot on Kang-shi's face. The head of the welding department immediately fainted when he saw his daughter's health situation. Kang-hyuk asked to get a medical glove because she had to cover the heart wound before Jung was sick because of plasma loss. For the first time, doctors saw that this special method was unexpectedly effective. The medical glove can only be held for 10 minutes, and during that time, the ventricular wall must be strengthened. After that, the medical glove had to be removed, and it was impossible to let it lie in the human body. Kang-hyuk asked to get an endoscope used for Yendi's surgery. Hearing the announcement, Nurse John and the cardiologist were also surprised. At this time, the nurse conveyed Kang-shi's words. Yusi immediately ran away. She had 5 minutes. Hearing this, Nurse John didn't even have time to run, and the head of the department Han ran first. After the endoscope was transferred to Kang-hyuk, it was used to find places to fix the medical gloves and then remove them one by one. Such a difficult heart surgery that he was able to complete in more than 4 hours. Closing the patient upside down is to go to Kang-hyuk, hand over the rest to Dr. Jung while he goes out to wash his hands. Seeing that his daughter had been saved, the head of the welding department could only kneel down and thank Kang-hyuk. These are the patients who make the budget deficit, whether they should be saved or not. The head of the welding department deeply regretted that it was not until he was an insider that he realized the importance of the trauma department. Then the head of the welding department came to stand by his daughter's bedside. Kang-hyuk went in to check and found that all of Jung's indicators have returned to normal. At this time, Kang-shio wanted the head of the welding department to call her name because the familiar voice would probably wake up. However, the head of the engineering department couldn't call forever. Kang-shio only called 1 sentence and opened his eyes. Everyone found it strange, but when I woke up, I was happy, so no one asked questions. The head of the welding department didn't know how to thank Kang-shio. He immediately hugged the head of the welding department and said that there were many ways that the 2 of them went back to the office to negotiate. The first is the budget case. The dean of the academy department promised to help Kang-hyuk, but perhaps the coordinating director will not listen. Kang-shio didn't care much about this. He wanted to know the secret that the dean of the academic department said in the meeting. It turned out that through a friend at the World Peace Society, the head of the engineering department learned a piece of information. Kang-hyuk has been abroad for 6 years, but has only worked for 5 years in the Peace Society. 1 year later, he moved to Afghanistan to work for an organization called Black Wing, which he heard made a lot of money. In particular, Kang-hyuk not only holds a scalpel, but also holds other people's onion guns because that place is a war zone. Dean Han promised to keep his mouth shut, and he didn't tell anyone about this. But is it true that you use to onion other people? Kang Shi-yu signaled to Dean Han, who was silent for a long time. After leaving the room, Kang Shi-yo also warned again, making the head of the welding department afraid to turn pale. At this time, the male liver transplant patient had recovered, so he went to visit his sister who had just woken up. Their family story made Nurse John and Dr. John cry tears. Only Kang Hyuk is still calm like that, wondering why they have to be happy to live. Why are they crying? There are things that carefree and thoughtless people like you can't understand. Now the organ donation center came to them, wanted to invite Kang Hyuk to be on TV, so he immediately went to the dressing room. The organ donation center belongs to the Ministry of Welfare because it was touched by the story of the patient's family. They want to sponsor all the costs in exchange for posting a touching story online. Kang Hyuk appeared as the creator of miracles. He only needed to greet them for an hour. However, during the interview, Kang Hyuk suddenly received a call from the rescue team. The reporters kept making noise. Kang Shi-yu accused them of holding their mouths like this, and they lost all the images of doctors. But Kang Hyuk neglected to turn around and fall, because for him, patients are important. Dr. Jung immediately prepared his luggage to go to the yard to leave. While Kang Hyuk was changing Dr. Jung asked a question. Do you know what black wings are? Hearing the real disciple's question, Kang Shi-yu was suddenly speechless. At this time, the video of Kang Hyuk cursing the reporter is going viral online. On the other side, Dr. Jung had some time to try to find out how to close the heart tear with gloves that someone had actually done. Accidentally, Dr. Jung noticed that this person also had a tattoo on his arm like Kang Shi-yu. Maybe it was the same person. Suddenly, Dr. Jung received a call from Kang Hyuk, informing him that he was about to take a helicopter again. Everyone even made it into a napkin, which made Nurse John laugh. On the contrary, the minister's face was very unsightly. I didn't expect Kang Hai to be so lautic. The person who was most happy was probably the director for finding a reason to discipline Kang Shi-yu. Dr. Jong's side is still continuing to learn about the Black Wing when he knows that it is a leading military organization. Because of the constant fighting, the Black Wing always has a doctor in the squad, and that doctor must also know how to fight. If that's really the case, then Kang Hyuk is beyond the top of the chop. So what's more? Suddenly, Kang Hyuk appeared. Dr. Jong hurriedly closed the computer, but he already knew everything. He helped Dr. Jong answer the question of why Kang Hyuk came to the Black Wing, because he was paid a lot of money. Suddenly, the hospital issued a black code reporting that there had been a mass accident on the bridge. After receiving the notification, Kang Shi and Dr. Jong immediately ran to save people. An unestimated number of patients is constantly flooding into the hospital. Kang Hyuk asked for the support of all departments and then assigned tasks in the hospital to them. After that, he pulled Dr. Jong to the rescue helicopter that had just landed a patient. At this time, Kang Hyuk wanted to contact Captain and to inquire about the situation at the scene. Not only people in distress on a bridge, but there are also buses that fell off the bridge, but currently the rescue team cannot go down. Kang Hyuk decided to go to the scene to rescue the seriously injured people lying under the bridge. Dr. Jong wondered what about the patients in the hospital, but Kang Hyuk believed that other doctors would take care of it. Then he and Dr. Jong boarded a helicopter to fly to the place where the patient really needed him. On the other hand, the head of the emergency department reported to the director that 38 patients admitted to the hospital were all patients with choking injuries. The coordinator breathes in because this will reduce the cost of hospital treatment. The chief reminded the director to carefully coordinate his mouth because these are all human lives. But in fact, he thinks the same as the coordinating director. He even hoped that Kang Hyuk would make someone else leave forever as an excuse to fire him. The head of the emergency department advised the two old men not to be in a hurry to rejoice because Kang Shi is not here and he has flown to the scene. It is very likely that Kang Hyuk will take the seriously injured patient to the hospital. Hearing this, the director and the director of coordination immediately turned stupid. At the same time, the government is also paying close attention to the mass accident. Hearing that Kang Hyuk had arrived at the scene, the minister put all his faith in him. At this time, the helicopter landed at the foot of the bridge where the horrific accident occurred. Kang Hyuk told Captain and that it was necessary to classify patients who were alive or gone forever. They shouldn't waste time with people who have died, and seriously injured patients should be given priority to save first. It is necessary to make full use of time to save a significant number of people. Kang Hyuk broadcast a loudspeaker to inform the rescue team to take the conscious people to the right for Dr. Jong to classify. Those who were unconscious, even if they had gone to sell salt, gave them to the left for him to sort himself. Rescuers immediately proceeded, but unfortunately one patient did not survive. Kang Hyuk urged the rescue workers to take the time to save others. A young girl was also among the victims, but she said she was hugged tightly by her brother, so she was only slightly injured. Then she begged Kang Hyuk to save her poor brother. Suddenly, the rescue team brought a young man with an abdominal injury who is currently unconscious. Kang Hyuk began to stitch up the young man's plasma and then instructed Dr. Jong on how to handle it. Then he had to take the patient back first and then handle the case himself. Because Kang Hyuk still has to be here to continue to classify seriously injured patients. Dr. Jung felt unconfident, but she still believed in him. After a while, Dr. Jung immediately put the patient on the helicopter and returned. The season room had been carefully prepared by Nurse John and was ready for battle. Dr. Jung was still shaking a little, but was encouraged by Nurse John. Therefore, he decided not to depend on Kang Hyuk-see's trust, so that the tube removal surgery could begin. On the other side of Kang Hyuk-se, there was another seriously injured patient. The aunt had an open fracture. Seeing that she was screaming in extreme pain, Kang Hyuk-se immediately gave painkiller vitamins to her aunt. Rescuers found her aunt carrying insulin, probably diabetic. Kang Hyuk-se determined that this was an emergency and immediately asked rescuers to take her to the hospital. Only one seriously injured patient remained, the last boy with a torn abdomen, and the plasma was pouring out nonstop. As soon as she looked at Kang Shi, she realized that this was the little girl's brother just now. Captain said that the boy did not have much hope, hoping that Kang Hyuk-se would give priority to his aunt. But only he was capable of saving the boy, so he couldn't turn a blind eye. Captain reminded Kang Hyuk-se that there was also a patient before that, how he could save all 3 people. In the end, Kang Hyuk-se was determined not to abandon a single patient. He contacted the head of the Han department to ask him to assist in the surgery and then called an orthopedist. Dean Han was confused because of how he could operate on the injury. Kang Hyuk-se had no choice, so she asked the head of the Han department. Moreover, Kang Hyuk-se also believed that he would be able to do it, and after speaking, he immediately hung up. De-young saw that the head of Kwa Han was still hesitant, so he added a word of encouragement. I see that Dad is very cool with a scalpel, so let's hold a knife to save more people. Dean Han was delighted, so he decided to listen to his daughter. After that, the head of the Han department came to find a doctor to ask for help. The doctor who presented the picture found it a little strange that the head of the Han department was so enthusiastic today. But because he was the head of the Han department, he also decided to support the trauma department. The anesthesiologist wanted to stop Jong Yin and taught him a lesson. As a doctor, don't give up, just live like a real person. I don't know if it was because I was too angry or too shocked, but the anesthesiologist froze his face. At the same time, the nurse contacted the anesthesiology department to find an emergency doctor. The anesthesiologist signaled that he was not here, but Jong Yin also heard the phone call. He didn't need to go wrong, but voluntarily went to support the critical surgery. After going outside, Jong Yin met the head of the anesthesiology department. She wanted Jong Yin not to give the department hope. 2 years ago, they couldn't recruit a full-time anesthesiologist, so Jong Yin will sit in that position. At this time, She took the boy back to the hospital and immediately moved into the operating room. Dean Han had never encountered this case before, so he felt a little scared. After that, Song Hai returned to perform abdominal rupture surgery. He constantly urged the head of the Han department to hurry up because there were 2 more patients waiting for Kang Shi-yu-si. Dean Han came to help, but the anesthesiologist was still nowhere to be seen. At this moment, Jiang Yin appeared and immediately began to anesthetize the boy. Tang Shio asked the head of Kwa Han to cover the wound so that he could go out and wash his hands. The lower abdomen was already taken care of, and Song Shi-o was going to hand over the upper abdomen to the head of the Han department. Suddenly, the boy kept bleeding, and his blood pressure increased to 180. It turned out that the adrenal glands had been damaged by the boy who had a history of cancer. Dean Han began to be confused, and Jiang Yin took the initiative to infuse the calf with vitamins, limiting the flow of blood and injuries as much as possible. There was no other way for Song Shi-yu-si to decide to remove the adrenal glands. Dean Han panicked and feared that the boy's health would deteriorate after the surgery. But Kang Shi-yu-si finished cutting in 10 seconds, and the boy's condition gradually recovered. Song Hai-yu-si must praise Mr. Ongwen for his extremely wise decision. The boy was saved, so Tang Shio entrusted the rest of the work to the head of the Han department because he had to save other patients. On the other side, Dr. Jung successfully removed the iron tube from the young man's body. However, the condition is still uncontrolled. Blood and injuries continue to flow. Dr. Jung was confused in the wound treatment, fortunately instructed by the experienced nurse John. Kang Xiao hurriedly ran to the operating room. He scolded Dr. Jung for working slowly. That sentence made him feel a little sorry for himself, because he had tried his best anyway. Then Song Shi-yu-si asked Dr. Jung about the position where he would take care of the rest. At the same time, the doctor presenting the surgery for the aunt unfortunately made a negligence. So he immediately asked for a green code to ask for more support, and Song Shi received a green code. He has finished dealing with the dangerous parts. Dr. Jung only needs to burn all the parts that are still bleeding plasma and close the patient's abdomen. After instructing, Tang Shi turned around and left. He had to prioritize patients in danger. After that, Song Shio went to his aunt's operating room. He asked the doctor here how the patient was doing. Knowing that there was no sign of gas change, Tang Shi-yu-si asked to be loaded with heparin. Seeing that the doctor was confused, Kang Hee-yu immediately explained. When the bone is fractured and the plasma vessel is damaged at the same time, the fat-filled bone will overflow into the vein. Fat passing through the atria and ventricles will affect the pulmonary vessels. The chiropractor understands that principle but is not awake enough to recognize it. Tang Hyuc will take care of the right leg, which will make the doctor look stunned because not everyone can have surgery for an open fracture. Hearing this, Sang-shi Yuc was extremely confident, so I said I would do it. At this time, Dr. Jung was carefully closing the abdomen for the patient, who was in a slightly sad mood because of Tang Shi's words just now. Nurse John encouraged Sang Hyuc, who was a difficult person. He was only worried about patients. But this is also the first surgery of Dr. Jung, and Sang Hyuc should not be so heavy-handed. Nurse John immediately affirmed that Dr. Jung did a great job. Otherwise, the patient would have passed away forever before Tang Shi arrived. If you are as excellent as Sang Hyuc, you should always be a treating doctor, not a trainee. Dr. Jung also felt somewhat comforted, so he thanked Nurse John. On the other side, the coordination director was watching the news when he saw that the reporters were very interested in the mass accident on the bridge. The 3 most seriously injured patients were all transferred to the Medical University Hospital. The coordinating director was extremely impatient. He immediately ran to find the head of the emergency department. Unfortunately, if Kang Shi-yuc can't save the patient, he will lose all the image of the hospital. However, even the head of the emergency department did not know what the situation was in the operating room. At this moment, Kang Shi and Dr. Jung walked out of the operating room. Only 3 hours after bringing the patient out, the coordinating director said that all 3 patients had died. However, Sang Hyuc did not take credit for himself, but he named the people who contributed to the surgery. First was Dr. Jung, followed by Nurse John, in addition to Dean Han. The anesthesiologist noted that he and many doctors from all departments in the hospital also contributed to the success. He hurriedly chased after Gang Shio, afraid that he would say miscellaneous things in front of the reporter. However, the reporter chased the coordinating director away from the camera so that they could interview Kang Shi-yuc. In front of all the Korean people, Tang Shi-yuc announced that all 3 of the most seriously injured patients have been saved by him. Because of all those great contributions, Sang Hyuc sends his sincere thanks to them. He also hopes that the trauma care center will be a reliable destination for people across the country in the future. To do that, Sang Hyuc hopes to have everyone's support. Taking the opportunity, Sang Hyuc also had a proposal to the coordination director. He wanted to recruit more personnel for the trauma care center. Standing in front of the reporter, the director of coordination did not dare to refuse. At this time, he only knew how to push this huge responsibility to the director. Tang Shi-yuc was made by the country to make the director extremely bitter, because he hoped that the director would see the news that would help him fulfill his wish. At this moment, he received a call from the minister to run away from the sun. The director was forced to stamp and decide to recruit more personnel for the trauma department. The next day, the whole news was full of praise for Kang Hyuc and the trauma care center. Unexpectedly, Kang Hyuc suffered from severe narcissism and posted comments praising herself in the article. Nurse John spoke ill of Kang Shi-yuc. It was indeed a greedy person, and he found out that she was too afraid to leave. Actually, people don't understand Kang Shi-yuc's intentions, so they think of him like that. The trauma department is considered a thorn in the eye of the hospital, so Sang Hyuc has to polish her name. The more attention it attracts, the less the hospital dares to touch the trauma department. Kang Hyuc will be a holy place to defend the doctor that he's the god and son, and Nurse John is the saint. But the holy woman was a little clumsy, so she hoped that no one would see this case. On the other hand, the director was extremely angry because he had to recruit more people for the trauma department, This month alone, Kang Hyuc has dispatched helicopters 5 times to make up for that deficit. The director also remembered that the coordinating director pushed the responsibility on television. Or is it to cut the highest paid personnel here so that it is enough to pay for the center's fees? The coordinating director was afraid of turning pale, and he promised the director that he would find a way to deal with Kang Shi-yuc. After that, the director of coordination returned to the office to try to handle the case. He angrily told the head of the Han department about the director pushing the budget deficit for him. Knowing that the director had signed and decided to spend more budget for the trauma department, the head of the Han department was also breathed in. Seeing the attitude of the head of the Han department, the coordinating director thought that he had betrayed him. Dean Han immediately denied it because of his brother's 20-year relationship. Dean Han quickly found a way to retreat, making the coordination director still feel suspicious. At this time, the helicopter was dispatched to the hospital again. The coordinating director could only swear. He was determined not to let Kang Shi-yuc shut up. After that, the coordination director went to the rescue commissioner and asked the rescue commissioner to prevent Kang Hyuc from dispatching a rescue helicopter. Accidentally, this scene was discovered by the head of Kwa Han when passing by. Although he couldn't hear it, Dean Han knew that it was not a good thing. At this time, Kang Hyuc and the rescue team were transferring the patient into the hospital. Captain Han respects Kang Hyuc very much when he sees him working tirelessly. Not only that, Captain Han also helped Kang Hyuc to carry out hospitalization procedures for patients. However, after returning to the base, Captain Han received a notice that a new person would replace the captain of the rescue team. Moreover, this is the plan of the coordinating director and the rescue commissioner. On the other side, Kang Hyuk was preparing to operate on the patient, and here, the perfect lineup of the trauma department was assembled. Nurse Jung-woo is the anesthesiologist Song Hyuk and Dr. Jung, the main surgeon. Out of nowhere, a dreamy nurse appeared who didn't know what to do. Mr. Song Hyuk was extremely angry, and Nurse Jung immediately relieved the new nurse that she had just been recruited. Knowing that the nurse had just applied to this department because saving people was her dream, Song Hyuk temporarily ignored it. After the surgery, Song Hyuk received a notice from Dr. Jung that a climber had fallen. He wanted to dispatch a rescue helicopter, but received bad news that captain and had been sent elsewhere. Song Hyuk took the initiative to call the rescue team, but the other party deliberately bought time. Seeing this, Song Hyuk was extremely angry because human life was counting every second and every minute. The new captain was forced to come out. He thought that Song Hyuk sent the helicopter as his own property, so he asked for permission not to serve. Wanting the helicopter to take off, Song Hyuk was forced to apply for a dispatch order. The patient didn't have time to wait. Song Hyuk immediately swore that the captain would just hang up. Song Hyuk didn't have time to fight with him now to save an important person. Dr. Jung called to inquire about the patient's situation and found that he seemed to be in a very critical condition. It is not possible to maneuver the helicopter, and the rescue team will take the patient to the road entrance. Hearing this, Song Hyuk immediately questioned Dr. Jung. Did he now take a taxi there? Dr. Jung immediately answered that in the hospital there are ambulances. The budget invested in ambulances is a lot of good cars. But the hospital only wanted to color with the superiors, so they didn't use it before. Song Hyuk urged Dr. Jung and Nurse Jung to get into the car so that there would be enough troops. After that, Song Hyuk drove himself. He rushed fast at the speed of the altar, causing Nurse Jung and Dr. Jung to almost lose their hearts. Later, the ambulance arrived at the designated location of the rescue team to transport the patient out. Everyone puts the patient in the car together. Nurse Jung will drive back. The rescue worker instructs Nurse Jung to steer. Unexpectedly, her driving skills were also of the upper class. The condition of this patient is identical to the patient who fell off the mountain last time. Kang-hyuk wanted to use the old way to decompress the patient's intracranial pressure, so he asked Dr. Jung to disinfect and shave his head. However, after punching a hole in the patient's body, the situation is still not satisfactory. Kang-hyuk wanted to punch one more hole, but only now did Dr. Jung speak his mind. It's past the golden time to save patients as we can maneuver helicopters. Kang-hyuk still didn't give up, making Dr. Jung feel wet. What is the purpose of saving so many people when our efforts are not recognized? Because of the budget deficit, the hospital constantly makes it difficult for them to be extremely tired. At this time, Dr. Jung wanted Kang-hyuk to look at reality. The failure to dispatch the helicopter today was definitely due to the involvement of the superiors in the hospital. Kang-hyuk scolded Dr. Jung for being silent, and then did as he asked the patient to have a chance to survive. When the ambulance arrived at the hospital, Nurse Jung discovered that Kang-hyuk and Dr. Jung had a friction. Although they still took the patient to the emergency room together, they did not say a word to each other. The head of the neurology department helped the patient with a CT scan, and then he concluded that the patient could live vegetatively for the rest of his life. Anyway, Kang-hyuk's efforts helped the patient survive. The neurology department will continue to monitor the patient. Now Nurse Jung came in to announce that the patient's family had come to Kang-hyuk to go out to tell the family about the patient's condition. The mother was extremely devastated when she learned that her son had to live a vegetative life all his life. At this time, Kang-hyuk was also very sad because he couldn't do anything more. Dr. Jung still believes that if there was a helicopter to rescue the patient, he would not have fallen into this situation. On the other side, the head of the department Han accidentally overheard the conversation of the head of the neurology department with his subordinates. Knowing that Kang-hyuk's attempt to save people failed due to the failure of a rescue helicopter, Dean Han understood that this was the coordinator's plan. Dean Han was going to tell Kang-hyuk, but was afraid that the coordinating director would find out. So he disguised himself and called Kang-hyuk on a public phone. Kang-hyuk heard the voice and realized that Dean Han was informing him of the news. Knowing that the coordinator was the one who stopped the helicopter from taking off, Kang-hyuk immediately looked for him and talked right and left. The coordinating director still didn't know the crime when he asked Kang-hyuk to give evidence. Kang-hyuk felt warm on behalf of the patient and cursed the coordinator as a bastard. He angrily grabbed his shirt, but Kang-hyuk pitted him. He didn't lose, so it was best for him to lie still. Hearing this, the coordinating director could only lie still and did not dare to move. Mr. Kang-hyuk turned to leave. Only then did the coordinating director dare to swear. At this time, Nurse Jung called Dr. Jung to go to the rooftop and said that Kang-hyuk wanted to see him. Dr. Jung felt strange, but still followed Nurse Jung's words. However, Kang-hyuk is not here, but it turns out that Nurse Jung wants to see Dr. Jung. She knew that Dr. Jung was heartwarmed by today's incident, so she called him here. Every time he was upset about something, Nurse Jung would go to the rooftop and curse at the ventilation pipe, so he would feel more relieved. Nurse Jung didn't know that there were still people who had to be cursed at the staff in the kitchen. She wants Dr. Jung to try to do the same as herself so that she can relieve stress. Dr. Jung has never sworn, so he can only say 2 damn words. Nurse John only knew because he laughed, but Dr. Jung also felt better. The two sat down together to confide in them to make their souls more relieved. Nurse John knew that Dr. Jung was heartwarmed because his efforts were not recognized. She was also afraid that he would quit the trauma department, but Dr. Jung promised to never give up. Hearing him say that, Nurse John felt somewhat relieved. Dr. Jung is exactly the same as Nurse John when she first entered the trauma department, but it has been 5 years. Nurse John remembered the reason for staying, because she wasn't a superhero. Without this person, someone else would, and unknowingly, that person was just me. I don't know if it's bad luck or luck, but Nurse John thinks this position is also good. Dr. Jung was also accidentally the chosen one, so Nurse John hoped that he would not quit. When the two promised not to give up together, Dr. Jung also untied the knot in his heart. Suddenly, Dr. Jung received a message from Kang Shi-ao asking him to come to the cafeteria. Dr. Jung took the opportunity to apologize to Kang Hyuk for intending to abandon the patient in the morning. Kang Hyuk didn't blame him because anyone who falls into that situation will not be consistent enough. In this life, there are always departures that no one mentions. Kang Hyuk recalled that her father's death was also such a bland departure. Only doctors know what patients have to endure before closing their eyes. Therefore, Kang Hyuk swore that even if the patient gave up, he would not give up on the patient. Kang Hyuk hopes that Dr. Jung will find a reason to have consistency in his heart. That's how he truly became a great doctor. After listening to it, Dr. Jung confidently promised that he would definitely do it. On the other hand, the head of Kwon was called to his office by the coordination director. He was afraid that the coordination director would know that he was whispering. However, the head of Kwon was worried that the coordinating director only wanted to ask him to find a way to destroy Kang Hyuk. Last time, the head of the Han department said that he knew Kang Hyuk's secret. The coordinating director wanted to listen, but the head of Kwon kept silent. The coordinating director speculated that Chief Kwon had sided with Kang Hyuk, but he immediately denied it. The coordinating director threatened that if the head of the Han department did not tell Kang Hyuk's secret, he would cut the budget of the rectal surgery department and transfer it to the trauma department. The coordinating director wants the head of Kwon to make an informed choice. But when it comes to this step, the head of Kwon is also out of options. He didn't want to betray the person who had saved his daughter in any way other than offend him. The coordinating director always talks about gratitude without visiting Ji-hoon once. Dean Han warmly left, causing the coordinating director to be cornered to the end. The next day, the coordinating director came to find the director and gave the director a report. The family of the fallen patient has asked for an investigation into the reason why his son has to live vegetatively. The director was extremely distressed, but the director of coordination said that this was a good opportunity to get rid of Kang-hyuk. Knowing that he had a plan, the two old men looked at each other and smiled sinisterly. At this time, there was a patient who did not know where to be transferred to the hospital. The patient who was hit by the blade is still in the body that is gradually cutting into the artery. Kang-hyuk wanted a CT scan to see how deep the blade was, and Nurse John ran to ask for the operating room to be prepared. However, something bad happened because there was an order to restrict Kang-hyuk from the hospital to investigate medical negligence. The dispatcher told the patient's mother that Kang-hyuk had used a sharp object to impact the patient in the ambulance. He manipulated the mother, who did not know about medicine, saying that it was not the right procedure, so the mother filed a lawsuit. At this moment, Nurse John ran over to announce that the coordinator was holding a press conference. Acknowledging Kang-hyuk's medical negligence, the security guards blocked the door to prevent Kang-hyuk from passing. So he couldn't enter the operating room. He had a headache thinking about how to solve it, and finally handed over the patient to Dr. Jung. After speaking, Kang-hyuk continued to run to release the anger in his heart. He went to the head of the emergency department and said that he did not treat him wrongly, and the head of the emergency department should have been a person who understood so that he could evaluate medical malpractice fairly. Yet he followed the coordinating director to accuse Kang-hyuk of baselessness. Hearing him say that, the head of the emergency department stiffened his throat and couldn't explain anything. On the other side, Dr. Jung was still confused about what to do with the patient. Nurse John advised him to calm down, and Dr. Jung decided to follow Kang-hyuk's instructions to take the patient for a CT scan. When the patient was put into the CT scanner, his blood pressure suddenly increased sharply, so Dr. Jung immediately asked for a green code. On the other side, Kang-hyuk received a green code asking the head of the emergency department to open the operating ring. If the patient dies forever at Kang-hyuk Hospital, it will make the emergency department bear all the responsibility. There was no other way, but the head of the emergency department agreed with Kang-hyuk. Then Kang-hyuk rushes to the CT scan room to save the person who is about to die forever. Anyone who has a brief grasp of the patient's situation knows that they must immediately squeeze the cervical artery so that the child does not continue to be deeply inserted. Then Kang-hyuk wants Nurse John to go and prepare the emergency room. When Nurse John ran to the emergency room, he unexpectedly said that Kwon had already prepared and the new nurse was also very supportive. Nurse John calls Kang-hyuk to take the patient to the operating room. She also encouraged people to try to get the surgery started quickly. It is necessary to remove the assignment from the patient before it severs the aorta. Kang-hyuk and Dr. Jung successfully coordinated to remove the delivered child, and now the patient's artery needs to be replaced. So Kang-hyuk asked Nurse John and Dr. Jung to get an artificial pulse. The two ran like rockets. Nurse John ran for 5 years, so they were much faster. However, she was refused an artificial circuit by the provider because it was very expensive and needed to be confirmed by a doctor. Now, Dr. Jung also ran to the place and hurriedly said that I'm a doctor. The provider still refuses to ask for approval from the dispatcher director. It's true that forcing people too much to ask for, we robbed, so the two locked the supply staff outside and went to find an artificial circuit. After finding them, the two quickly fled so that the supply staff had no chance to stop them. Dr. Jung couldn't keep up with Nurse John, so as soon as he got to the door of the operating room, he encountered the head of the welding department. He wanted to inform Song Shi-yu-si that the coordinating director of the hospital press conference would admit his medical negligence. Dr. Jung returned to the operating room. He wanted Song Shi to explain. But Song Shi-yu-si could not abandon the patient because there was nothing important except the patient. At this time, Song Shi-yu-si also had to carry out a pulse replacement for the patient. Dr. Jung could not advise Song Shi-yu-si, so he was helpless. But the head of the neurology department couldn't help because he really didn't know how Song Shi-yu-si gave first aid to the patient. The head of the welding department returned to the office and continued to call others for help. However, no one could help him, which made him feel extremely strong. He looked at Nurse John and then at Mr. Kwon, but they couldn't help either. On the other side of the press conference, the head of the welding department ran away again. He wanted to ask the head of the neurology department to be the one who knew the patient's condition best at that time. At this time, the coordinating director invited the patient's mother to tell her son's situation. The mother was extremely distressed because her son was only 20 years old and had to live vegetatively. She listened to the coordinating director blamed Song Shi-yu-si for medical negligence, which made everyone extremely sympathetic. After that, the coordination director took responsibility for the hospital. He also gave the opinion of Korea's best trauma surgeons, and no one approved of Song Shi's first aid. The coordinating director expressed concern that although Song Shi-oh is a good doctor, he refuses to listen to the advice of others. Song Shi-yu-si's arrogant temperament will one day make the patient die forever. The anesthesiologist below was secretly happy to see that this time Song Shi was all real. At this moment, Song Shi-yu-si appeared, threw a kick at the anesthesiologist's buttocks, and then stepped forward in front of the journalist's wing. As soon as she saw Song Shi-yu-si, the patient's mother couldn't hold back her anger. Thankfully, Nurse John helped Song Shi to keep her so that she wouldn't make a fuss. Song Shi-yu-si has something to declare that it is not medical negligence. Then he asked Dr. Jung to give a medical report to the reporter. Witnessing that scene, the coordination director wanted to stop it, but could not catch up. In the report, it is clearly stated that a case of a patient similar to Song Shi-yu-si did the same thing to that patient. Currently, the patient is still alive and healthy, but what is the difference here? The previous patient was saved because Song Shi-yu-si took advantage of the golden moment because there was a rescue helicopter to respond in time. As for the patient this time, someone deliberately prevented Song Shi-yu-si from dispatching a rescue helicopter. It must be known that Song Shi-yu-si tried very hard to save the patient's life. After that, Song Shi-yu-si also exposed the person who stopped the helicopter from taking off as the coordination director. Seeing that he still wanted to deny it, Song Shi said that the rescue commissioner had admitted to the minister and that the police would soon have the results of the investigation. Hearing this, the patient's mother angrily slapped the coordinator in the face, making him embarrassed and trying to avoid his face. Taking this opportunity, Song Shi-yu-si also had something to say to reporters. The origin of this incident was that the trauma department continuously used helicopters, causing a budget deficit for the hospital. Song Shi-yu-si does not want a person to be robbed of the opportunity to live because of money. Therefore, he hopes that senior officials will look at themselves. Finally, he also hopes that in the future they will not make this mistake. Thanks to sufficient evidence, this case quickly came to an end. The coordinating director decided to go to the police station to report, but he refused to go down the hole alone. In front of the reporter, the coordinating director, to Jiak Song-hai-oh, was the minister sent to the hospital to sabotage the hospital from the inside. The minister saw the news and felt that the coordinating director had run out of medicine. However, this incident had a significant impact on her. The minister is someone who is highly likely to become president in the future. Journalists repeatedly called the minister's office to demand an explanation, but the minister refused every interview. Just when the water was boiling, the South Korean government received bad news from abroad. 11 doctors in the Peace Corps in Nansu are involved in a shooting. The rebels intended to capture 11 doctors, but luckily the Peace Corps appeared. In time, Captain Lee commanded the self to destroy all 3 rebels, but unfortunately he was also hit by copper candy. Currently, Captain Lee is in an extremely critical condition and has been transferred to a local hospital. The minister immediately contacted Kang-hyuk and asked him to go to Nam-su to save Captain Lee. This is also a good opportunity for Kang-hyuk to prove the ability of the 2 people to erase the scandal. Kang-hyuk prepares his luggage and leaves for him, and then he hands over the trauma department to the head of the Korean department. Even though he didn't know how to take care of it, Kang-hyuk still believed that Dean Han could do it. Now that Kang-hyuk has a doctor and a nurse, there's a shortage of an anesthesiologist, so he decides to go find Mr. Jun. After listening to it, Mr. Kwon did not say no, carrying his luggage with Kang-hyuk. When the quartet left for the airport, they saw that there was an assistant waiting here, and the flight quickly took off. Kang-hyuk doesn't have time to rest, but he reads through Captain Lee's medical report. There were a total of 5 pills, including 2 copper candies shot in the hand, 3 copper candies shot in the abdomen. 2 of them pierced through. There was still 1 tablet stuck in the abdomen, in addition to 1 copper candy stuck in the left hand. If Captain Lee could wait for Kang-hyuk, he could only pray at this time. On the other hand, the minister went to the director because she was determined to make the same budget deficit. When she asked why he had stopped the helicopter from rescuing him, the director pretended not to know. But not knowing is also a crime because he is the director of the institute and does not know anything. At this time, the minister told the director about one story about the heavenly shock. She had agreed with Kang-hyuk that if he could save Captain Lee, he would build a helipad at the hospital. Later, it will be the basis for the development of a trauma care center. The director said the minister was trying to put pressure on his hospital. She didn't deny that I was putting pressure on her. On the other side, the injury team has arrived in South Sudan, but the embassy announced one more bad news. Last night, the local hospital was attacked on one of the rebels who was the younger brother of the rebel leader. He wanted to find Captain Lee for revenge, so the embassy transferred him to a suburban hospital. The situation is a bit complicated. The facilities of this hospital are too shabby. Captain Lee was cared for in poor conditions, leading to necrotizing fasciitis. All kinds of infections are multi-organ failure, and the hospital does not have enough plasma for transfusion. All plasma reserves were destroyed in last night's attack. Without plasma reserves, Kang-hyuk could not do abdominal surgery. First of all, he will prevent necrosis in organs that are showing suspicious signs. The military doctor suggested amputation, otherwise Captain Lee would be gone forever at any time. Dr. Jung wanted to stop him, but Kang-hyuk asked him to prepare for surgery. After that, everyone moved Captain Lee to the operating room together. At the same time, in South Korea, people are also watching Captain Lee's case. They expect Kang-hyuk to create a miracle similar to the one that saved the lives of all 3 accident patients on the bridge at the same time. This will also confirm whether Kang-hyuk was introduced by the minister due to real ability or just clinging to other acquaintances. At the same time, ambulances took a lot of patients to the hospital. Today, the head of the Han department will replace Kang-hyuk in charge of the trauma department. Looking at the chaotic situation in front of him, he didn't know what to do. The nurse relayed Kang-hyuk's message to the Korean dean to consider himself. The dean of the Korean department muttered to me that Kang-hyuk didn't expect to be really effective. This crazy work style is really Kang-hyuk's. Who else? At this time, Kang-hyuk also began surgery to treat necrotizing fasciitis and remove copper candy for Captain Lee. Very quickly, the 2 copper candies in his right hand were taken out, but the process of treating necrosis was quite complicated. You can't even let Captain Lee flow too much plasma, otherwise he will be gone forever because of the loss of plasma. There's still one left arm with more severe necrosis than the right arm. Seeing that Kang-hyuk decided to cut off, Dr. Jung advised him to take a good break. However, Kang-hyuk didn't rule out it because this was the best option. After the surgery, Kang-hyuk texted the minister that he had asked the embassy to send her a report. If Captain Lee wants to be saved, the government needs to provide an aerial ambulance. The message was sent at this time. Kang-hyuk was impatiently waiting for a response. Suddenly, the military doctor came over, and he thanked Kang-hyuk for his efforts. However, Kang-hyuk feels that military doctors are the real hard workers, because he is a potential factor for trauma surgery. Kang-hyuk made an appointment with a military doctor after being discharged from the army to find him to work. At this moment, the assistant ran to inform him that the government had responded to Kang-hyuk's request and that they would hold a video conference. Kang-hyuk asked dejectedly what time he had for the meeting now. Captain Lee is a national hero. Maybe saving him still has to be considered. However, Kang-hyuk was forced to participate in the meeting to pass the idea. The defense minister did not seem impatient to announce that he was preparing a passenger plane in about 2 weeks. Kang-hyuk angrily said that in 2 weeks, he would come and carry his cold body back. What Kang-hyuk needs is not a passenger plane, but an air ambulance. The defense minister didn't know what it was, so he had to ask his assistant, which made Kang-hyuk also feel helpless. On the other hand, the director called Mr. Gun to inquire about Captain Lee's situation. Jae-kwang also honestly replied that the situation was not very good. He just wants Captain Lee to leave forever so that Kang-hyuk will be held accountable. The director probed whether Kang-hyuk did anything wrong during the surgery. However, things like this indicate that Mr. Gun is not telling him the truth. The director wanted to record Mr. Gun to continue monitoring to help him catch Kang-hyuk. Mr. Gun agreed and hung up, but the conversation was overheard by Nurse John. Knowing that Mr. Gun was an insider, she felt extremely disappointed in her comrade. Gun wants to explain, but Nurse John wants him to go and explain to Kang-hyuk. Just at the same time, Dr. Jung rushed over to announce that Captain Lee was having a bad change. After receiving the news, Nurse John immediately returned to the hospital room. It seems that Captain Lie is lacking plasma, but where to get the plasma to transfer here? Nurse John had to use her own plasma because she was the only one with the O plasma group. Captain Lee's situation became more and more dangerous. So Kang-hyuk couldn't sit idly by and wait for the government to decide to transfer him immediately before the worst-case scenario happened. The car went through a long journey, and Captain Lee's plasma bottle was also running out. Nurse John decided to go ahead with the plasma transfer, but she did transfer the 500mm transition that would have been in jeopardy. However, Nurse John could not let everyone's efforts pour into the river and the sea while the plasma was still transmitted. Everyone was confused because they could transfer Captain Lie, but Kang-hyuk knew what to do. When Captain Lie is put into the ambulance, the military doctor wants to escort him, but his presence will be detrimental to Kang-hyuk. Kang-hyuk encouraged the military doctor for a while, and then got into the car and left with the team. The car kept moving until it was dark when Kang-hyuk stopped in front of a military base. The soldiers blocked the road of the car and asked who the people in the car were. And Kang-hyuk showed them the tattoos and asked them to tell the commander. The soldiers followed the commander's request and quickly received the news. He was extremely surprised by Kang-hyuk's return when the situation was extremely tense. At this time, Captain Lee's condition suddenly deteriorated, but the soldiers had not yet received the commander's notice. Kang-hyuk decides to go to a risky country. He pushes a gear lever into the military base. The soldiers immediately opened fire, making everyone extremely scared, and Kang-hyuk still calmly dodged the copper candy. Unfortunately, he caught the sniper's eye and was about to be given copper candy. At this time, the soldiers received a message to let the car pass. It turned out that the commander wanted to confirm if it was Kang-hyuk or not. Such courage cannot be wrong because Kang-hyuk is a hero in the eyes of the commander. Many brothers in the Black Wing were saved by Kang-hyuk. Now Kang-hyuk needs help, so the commander asked to support him as much as he can. After taking Captain Lie to the emergency room, the foreign doctor wanted to help Kang-hyuk, but he said his team would do it themselves. Even the commander came to watch Kang-hyuk operate on Captain Lie. Foreign doctors all shook their heads, saying that Captain Lee's chances of survival were very low. But the commander saw Kang-hyuk's gaze without the slightest hesitation. That's why the commander is sure that Kang-hyuk can succeed. Both the necrosis resection and the removal of the copper candy in the abdomen began to have to remove all of Captain Lee's infected small intestine. Then create an artificial excretory line so that the rest of the intestine has time to recover. Dr. Jung wondered what about the copper candy in Captain Lee's stomach? It may have been in the removed intestines, but if it was still in Kang-hyuk's stomach, it would have been out of the question. Dr. Jung was sent out to look for the copper candy in the removed intestine. Just as Kang-hyuk predicted, it was actually here. Dr. Jung could also breathe in. Inside, Kang-hyuk also reconstructed the excretory tract, and Nurse John seemed tired from the overdose of plasma. Kang-hyuk advises her to rest, but Nurse John has been trying to keep the patient safe and sound. After successful abdominal surgery, Kang-hyuk closed Captain Lee's abdomen. Now when it comes to the arm, everyone thinks that Kang-hyuk has cut off all the bones. But Kang-hyuk only removed the necrotic part to connect artificial bone. This means that after recovering, Captain Lie can still live normally. By the next morning, the surgery was finally completed, and Nurse John was tired and unconscious, lying in the hospital room. Infusion of water, but as soon as she woke up, she immediately asked the patient. Captain Lee's indicators are normal. The surgery was extremely successful. The most worrisome thing now is how they will get home. Maybe wait until Captain Lie is completely recovered. Kang-hyuk was already worried about this, so he then went to find the commander of the military zone. As soon as he saw him, he warmly welcomed Kang-hyuk's return. The commander invited Kang-hyuk to a spicy cup, and he went directly to the point. Kang-hyuk needed an air ambulance to return to South Korea. It was easy for the commander to be indebted to Kang-hyuk, but he didn't get a pilot. Knowing that they weren't a bunch of listeners, Kang-hyuk wanted to talk to them directly. At this time, Dr. Jung took Nurse John to the cafeteria to fill the empty stomach. Nurse John still didn't know where this was, so Dr. Jung told her about the lamp. Hearing that this place paid very well, Nurse John immediately wanted to ask for a job. Just when Kang-hyuk appeared, it seemed that everyone here knew him. Kang-hyuk tells Nurse John and Dr. Jung it's time to go back to Korea. They didn't expect Kang-hyuk to get an air ambulance so quickly, but it is also an extremely monumental one inside, fully equipped with medical equipment identical to a high-quality IQ room. Kang-hyuk wanted Dr. Jung to get the necessary medicine, but he asked Jung to go to work. When Jung brought the medicine box and luggage to the airport, Nurse John had something to tell him. She wanted Jung to answer honestly whether he was an insider or not. Instead of denying it, Nurse John immediately wanted to know the reason. Jung answered exactly what Nurse John had told Dr. Jung. Without this person, someone else will do it unintentionally. That person is just me. Anyway, after graduating, Mr. Won will apply to join the trauma department, so he doesn't want the trauma department to be dissolved. Nurse John was immediately excited that their team was about to have a new member. Everyone took off and flew back to Korea together, and the news was quickly brought to the people. Thanks to the presence of Kang-hyuk and the injury team, Commissar Lie was saved. It proves that Kang-hyuk is really capable of taking over the position of head of the trauma department, and the umbrella case was also smashed. The minister was extremely excited and held a welcome ceremony at the airport. Not only that, she will personally go to pick up Commissar Lee and the injury team. The minister also took this opportunity to promote the image of the rescue center. After the plane landed, the reporters immediately surrounded the surroundings. The minister shook hands to thank Kang-hyuk, and the reporters gathered at Commissar Lee. There was no other way for Kang-hyuk to attract their attention so that his teammates could take Commissar Lee to the hospital. In front of the camera, he summarized Commissar Lee's situation to the reporters. After recovering, Grand Commissar Lee can completely return to the army. Kang-hyuk needed to go back to take care of the patient, so he remembered the minister continuing to give interviews. However, the car had just departed. Kang-hyuk immediately asked to stop. Because he heard from the nurse's mouth, he knew that the head of the Han department was at the scene of the fire, and he really thought he was Kang-hyuk. There was no other way. Kang-hyuk had to borrow the minister's car to go to the scene in person. On the other side, rescue teams are moving people away from the fire. At this time, the head of the Han department was crying bitterly, but why did he come now? Kang-hyuk then asked the head of the Han department to help him classify the patients. When the situation was under control, Captain N suddenly ran to inform Kang-hyuk of the news. Dean Han is very enthusiastic about working professionally like Kang-hyuk. Suddenly, a big explosion blew away the courage of the head of Kwa Han. Kang-hyuk handed him a helmet and said that the next time he came to the scene, he would put it on. The company on the second floor contains oxygen cylinders for welding, which will cause a large explosion that needs to be evacuated immediately. Kang-hyuk has finished sorting the patients. He wants to ask the rescue team to take them to the hospital. Captain N immediately informed everyone that Kang-hyuk also assisted in getting the patient into the ambulance. When he returned to pick up the last patient, suddenly the building exploded, causing Kang-hyuk to be thrown away. Dean Han was also so crazy at that time that he almost rushed straight towards Kang-hyuk. But Captain N immediately held him back with a strong gesture to remind him that the inner area still has many hidden risks and that things like this should be handled by a professional rescue team. Rescuers quickly helped Kang-hyuk to her feet and brought the other patient out safely. This was a very severe burn and needed to be transported by helicopter to save every precious minute. On the helicopter, Kang-hyuk was still awake enough to ask the head of the Han department to contact the burn department for further support. Because he understands the patient's condition, he does not allow delay. At this time, Kang-hyuk himself could not continue the surgery because he himself was injured. The head of the Han department tried to check his wounds, but Kang-hyuk didn't feel the pain clearly. There was a high possibility that the tissue had been severely damaged. After that, all responsibility seemed to be fully given as he passed away, causing everyone to immediately rush him to the hospital in a state of tension like a string. At the end of the hospital corridor is a familiar fork that has repeatedly put Dr. Jung in a situation where he has to weigh his brains. Between taking the patient for a CT scan to understand the situation or directly entering the operating room, so as not to miss the crucial moment. The pressure from around made the atmosphere thicker. This time Dr. Jung decided to bring Kang-hyuk into the operating room immediately. He immediately called Dr. Jung to ask him to prepare an operating room for Kang-hyuk in an emergency. When Dr. Jung heard the news, he was so worried that his heart seemed to beat out of rhythm, only to report to the nurse and then hurriedly ran out. Before he decided to run straight to the helipad to pick up Kang-hyuk first, Kang-hyuk tried to get to that point just to say a brief, but heavy-handed sentence that he wanted Dr. Jung to be the one to operate on him. Noting that Mr. One wants to prevent it, because there is no consensus image, it is very difficult to determine the extent of the impact on the internal organs. Just one decision out of rhythm is a consequence that no one dares to think about. The head of the department was also worried, but at this time, Dr. Jung had begun to show off Kang-hyuk's familiar demeanor. His firm eyes and unhesitating voice made it difficult for others to refute. He hopes that everyone will trust and coordinate to complete the surgery. After a period of intense debate, it was like a group meeting with a large number of people, so everyone finally voted to believe in Dr. Jung's decision. The surgery for Kang-hyuk officially began quietly, but the pressure was enough to make anyone standing in the room clearly feel the sweat on the back of the shirt. A few days passed, and Kang-hyuk dreamily woke up from a long sleep. For a moment, I thought I had stepped into a very different place. But the familiar smell and pure white cloth quickly pulled him back to the reality of the hospital, which never knew how to lie. The news that Kang-hyuk woke up spread faster than the speed of internal transmission, and Dr. Jung ran like a professional athlete to the hospital room after hearing it. Everyone was present in large numbers and skillfully gave way to the person who was both the main doctor and the one who carried the expectations of the whole team. After learning that the situation of the patients in the fire was stable, Kang-hyuk returned to the story of his own surgery. He looked at the records and realized that before the operation, he was not allowed to have a CT scan. Dr. Jung calmly explained that at that time his body temperature rose abnormally fast. Suspecting that there was accumulated damage, the more naked it would be, the more dangerous it would be, so he chose to act immediately. Kang-hyuk nodded with satisfaction, appreciating the student's ability and decisiveness. After many times of scrutiny and reprimand, Dr. Jung finally received the recognition he deserved. The surge of emotions made him blurt out a very ordinary exclamation. So much so that people outside who heard the strange movement thought something was going on. And Kang-hyuk was so embarrassed that he pulled the blanket tightly like that. As long as he didn't see anyone, no one would see him. Sometime later, Kang-hyuk appeared on TV again, this time not because of a difficult situation, but because he almost became the face in his photo. Here he spoke seriously about the importance of rescue helicopters, emphasizing that every minute and second of life is more precious than a savings book begging for ammunition. Because no matter how good the doctor is, if he misses the right time, he can only sigh and plant a file. Not stopping at the theory, Kang-hyuk boldly proposed to build a helipad right on the hospital campus. Because no one has the patience to wait for the helicopter to land on a remote field, and then cross a small alley and the traffic lights as if running a relay. The proposal that was just made the whole studio nod in unison. The climax was more when the Minister of Medicine directly announced that he would deploy the construction of helipads for hospitals nationwide. A decision that is considered both decisive and clever, avoiding the implicit glances from Kang-hyuk. In the midst of everyone's agreement, only the director still shook his head resolutely, and people signed the resolution as gently as a certificate of merit. As for him, holding the seal carefully is like keeping an heirloom secret. So Kang-hyuk decided to personally go to the abbot's house to exchange cables. The form carries a reason that is enough to make the listener sit up straight. It turns out that the reason Kang-hyuk chose to work at Medical University Hospital was not because of reputation or conditions, but because of a debt of gratitude from 20 years ago when everyone refused to accept him. It was this hospital that welcomed and sowed a seed of gratitude that followed him to this day. The person who directly helped that day was none other than the current abbot. At that time, he was still a young doctor full of enthusiasm who was willing to work for patients without being afraid of hardships. Now, in Kang-hyuk's eyes, there's only the image of a leader who is gradually moving away from the fiery version of the past. What he needed was not to add a solemn mark, but for the director to find himself in the story. I thought it was just a reminder of old memories, who would have expected it to make him ponder for several days. Then, after a rather intense ideological struggle, he also withdrew the seal of power, measuring the pillar in the official resolution to choose Korea Medical University Hospital as the pilot site for the emergency support airport. It has become a new symbol of the speed and hope of the health sector. During the inauguration ceremony, the director appeared in a pink suit with a car wing so prominent that it made many people turn their heads and look back. The surprise was doubled when it was discovered that the head of Hwang also wore a similar color tone, accidentally turning the two into the most colorful couple that day. The culprit behind it was none other than Kang-hyuk, who generously donated things to both of them. Kang-hyuk was attending the Surgical Society's conference, where he expressed his desire to call for more manpower for the trauma care center. It was also here that he happened to meet the military doctor who had stood by him to help Captain Lie. The other person simply wants to know that if he enters this place, he can do something really valuable. With familiar simplicity, Kang-hyuk gave a reason that was neat enough for the other party to decide. Because sometimes just a sentence at the right time and the right person is the strongest call. The military doctor nodded to join Kang-hyuk and happily shook hands to welcome his new colleague. Don't forget to call him number 2 as a rare way of acknowledging that someone voluntarily follows him. After that, the two returned to the hospital where the ceremony was still going on. Kang-hyuk, with a familiar style, did not hesitate to take the microphone from the hand of the dean of the Korean department to say a few words. On every important occasion, he appears at the right time to occupy the spotlight, as pre-programmed to always be in the center. Meanwhile, the source posted a biography of Kang-hyuk with the intention of posting it online in the genre of fiction and action. Because simply no one can believe that such a doctor exists in real life. A person who is both good at his profession and daring to think and dare to do also has clear ideals. In the eyes of many people, it sounds quite illogical, but that's why Kang-hyuk's presence has become necessary in a society where money easily blurs the boundaries between those who work with their hearts and those who work with their prices. Then a doctor with both heart and stature, like him, appeared like a gentle but persistent reminder of the so-called medical ethics. The film not only tells a medical story, but also conveys the right spirit of the profession of physicians. A profession should be built on beliefs, not numbers. Hopefully, one day in the near future, Kang-hyuk will not only exist on the screen, but also become a real role model in everyday life. Okay, this is the end of the movie. You spend 3 seconds subscribing to the channel to support us. Thank you for tuning in to our channel. See you in the next movie.